let me give you an example of that. I was the industry director for a program called Access 5, which was all about trying to enable UAVs to fly in the national airspace. And at the time, the FAA had no clue what an unmanned air vehicle was. And so we set out, there was 10 different organizations. We wanted to try to be able to fly drones, as they're being called today, a lot, into the national airspace. And this was in the early 2000 time period where people weren't even thinking about it. They knew about the military flying it, but not in commercial airspace. And we set out a 5-year plan. It was going to cost us close to $500 million to go do and prove to the FAA and set up an organization with the FAA to start writing rules in the FAA language and the bylaws for us to be able to start flying UAVs in the national airspace. So we had to start writing federal aviation regulations, or FAR clauses, that had to be written in order to allow people to start flying. And FAA didn't even know what a UAV was at the time. But we had these 10 disparate organizations. Many of them were competing with each other, like Boeing and General Atomics and AeroVironment. All these companies that typically competed with each other. And now we were partnering up with one common goal and one objective. And we had one common pool of money to work from. And the power of collaboration was so effective, of us working together in such a powerful way, that we were able to accomplish that objective literally in under 3 years and under $300 million. We actually spent less than $200 million to really execute all, and the FAA stood up their program office and started running with it and executing on it, to the point where we actually stood down our organization separately early, because we had accomplished our objectives way ahead of schedule. And most people were saying, oh, this isn't going to happen, it's going to take way too long. And instead, we got it done early and under cost, ahead of schedule. Phenomenal results. And for me, one of the biggest experiences, typically when organizations are working together, especially ones historically compete with each other, they are constantly fighting with each other over how much of the money they're going to get. That's really where you know the rubber's meeting the road, is when you start applying money to specific resources and paying people to do jobs. And so we had something we called a mosh pit, where we would all get together in a room, and literally it looked like a mosh pit, where we were in this auditorium where people would stand up and present their ideas. We had developed work packages of work we had to do throughout the year, and we had this concept of choosing the best athlete. It didn't matter what organization you were from, it didn't matter who you were. We told everybody, take your badges off, we are now one organization. Doesn't matter who you actually are getting paid by or from. And so we set out, we had these mosh pits, we presented ideas, and I remember vividly one night, a team of people were presenting their idea on this one work package. They said, this is how we need to do it. They laid out their entire plan. They said, this is how much it's going to cost. And then they sat down, and the very next group stood up and said, no, this is our idea of how we can compete or complete the same project. And they went through their whole litany of stuff. And then, to my surprise, at the end of the second presentation, the leader of the first group stood up and he said, they have a much better idea than ours. And we recommend that we proceed with their idea. And not only that, I'd like to participate on their team. And so if you're willing, however we can carve out our work packages, we would like to help participate, but you have the better idea. When that happened, I knew we were being successful. We were being collaborative. It wasn't a turf war anymore. We weren't fighting for control or over the money. We were all working towards that common objective. And that's how things can be really powerful in a collaboration environment, where you accomplish much more than you ever anticipated, than you ever expected. And that was probably the most rewarding, one of the most rewarding experiences of my career, where I got to see that happen in actuality. And I was ecstatic because of the environment we had created that allowed that to happen. And it needs to be carefully thought out and constant repetition around reinforcing the message of collaboration, and that we're all working together like the badgeless society that I talked about. It has to be reinforced over and over again. And it took years, good year and a half before I really saw that first fruit that collaboration was working. But in the end, the amount of acceleration that we got from the work that we were doing was so powerful. We got things done so much faster, even though it took longer up front to do some laying in the groundwork. In the end, we were accelerating exponentially, and it was such a powerful experience.